The wind that rolled through the Blue Ridge foothills had a voice of its own. It wasn't harsh or loud. It hummed low, almost apologetic, brushing through pine trees, tapping on old window panes, and slipping under weathered cabin doors like a gentle visitor too polite to enter without permission. Ethan Tron stood beneath the porch roof of the Windflower Inn, gently wiping down the wooden sign above the gate. The letters had faded, hand-carved years ago by his grandmother, but he never replaced it. That board had seen more winters than most people in town. Once upon a time, this place was alive. Weekends full of chatter and check-ins, the smell of ginger broth and wood smoke, families soaking their feet in the mineral spring out back. Now the inn was a memory suspended in pine-scented stillness. Guests stopped coming when the new interstate opened. Everyone drove past these quiet mountain roads now, heading for big-name resorts in Asheville or Charlottesville. Wi-Fi speed and rain showers had replaced quilts and tea kettles. But Ethan stayed. Not because it made sense, but because leaving would have felt like betrayal. This house raised him. His grandmother, Ba Guai, ran the place with more warmth than most five-star hotels could fake. She'd say, if someone knocks when the night gets cold, open the door first, ask questions later. Ethan used to think she was just being sentimental. Now he knew better. There are rules to surviving loneliness, and hers were carved into the walls like gospel. He didn't expect the knock. Not at dusk. It was soft, almost too soft, but it broke the silence like a dropped teacup. He stepped off the porch and squinted through the fog settling over the gravel path. At the gate, kneeling on the cold stone walkway, was a woman. She was soaked from head to toe. Her hair clung to her face, her arms wrapped tightly around a small child whose pink coat had turned the color of dusk from damp. The woman looked up. No words, no tears, only that look, the one Ethan had seen once before, years ago, when a deer hit by a truck lay trembling on the roadside. She held out a crumpled $20 bill, both hands shaking. Ethan didn't move for a second. Then, quietly, he stepped forward, unlatched the gate, and held it open. "Come in," he said. The woman stood, slowly, as if her knees no longer trusted her. She clutched the little girl tightly and followed Ethan through the hallway without saying a word. He led them to the room closest to the kitchen, one he kept unlisted, the just-in-case room, a throwback to Ba Guai's lay of always having space for someone unexpected. No small talk, no ID, no credit card. Ethan placed a folded towel, a small pile of dry clothes, and a warm water bottle on the dresser, then left the door half open behind him and walked back toward the kitchen. He didn't know who they were, but he knew they needed a roof more than questions. For the first time in 6 months, he lit the stove for someone else. He pulled out a frozen chicken thigh, a piece of ginger, and a pouch of dry noodles. Nothing fancy, but in this house, even boiled soup meant something. The kettle hissed gently. Outside, an old pickup rattled down the road, familiar, fading. Inside, the smell of broth drifted toward the hallway, and somewhere in that in-between space of silence and steam, Ethan remembered something Ba Guai once told him. People who ask for shelter usually gave up pride long ago. What they need is warmth without shame. The door creaked. A small face peeked out, big eyes wide with hunger and fear, then disappeared. A few minutes later, both mother and daughter stood near the kitchen entrance. The woman's shoulders were stiff, her eyes wary but alert. Ethan didn't say anything. He simply pushed out a second chair. Eat, then sleep. She hesitated, then bowed her head. She tore a piece of chicken with trembling hands, blew gently, and fed her daughter. The little girl chewed slowly, eyes locked on Ethan like he might vanish if she blinked too long. He looked away. When the meal was done, the woman reached into her coat and pulled out the same $20 bill. She placed it on the table with two hands. I don't have anything else, but please take it." Her voice was soft but cracked, as if her throat had been holding back every word all day. Ethan didn't touch the money. He didn't even glance at it. He simply stood up, took the empty bowls, and walked to the sink. The money stayed on the table, untouched. That night he didn't sleep. He lay upstairs on the old wooden floor, blanket tossed aside, eyes locked on the ceiling fan that hadn't worked since last fall. He thought about the woman's hands, and the way her little girl clung to her coat like it was the last safe thing in the world. He remembered a night long ago when Bagwai let a stranger stay during a storm. Back then, Ethan asked, "What if he's dangerous?" She only smiled. "If he's knocking with nothing but the rain on his back, he's already been through enough." He didn't know why that memory returned now. Maybe because the inn had been too quiet for too long. Maybe because the wind tonight sounded less like mourning and more like a question. He turned his head toward the hallway. A warm glow seeped under the guest room door. Not bright, but alive. And that, more than anything, made the whole house feel just a little less hollow. He didn't know where they came from. He didn't know if they'd leave by morning, but they'd knocked, and he had answered.
Morning in the mountains doesn't arrive with sunshine. It creeps in, softly, gently, through the lace curtain of mist that hangs over everything. The forest hums quietly, as if unsure whether to wake or keep dreaming. And the Windflower Inn, with its creaky porch and pinewood shutters, feels like it's suspended between yesterday and something not quite called today. Ethan was already up, not because he set an alarm, just because sleep hadn't really come. He stood barefoot in the kitchen, pouring hot water into two ceramic mugs, his grandmother's old teacups, each painted with delicate branches of magnolia. One of them had a tiny chip on the rim. He gave that one to himself. Ginger, a little lemon, and a drizzle of honey from a jar that had crystallized at the bottom. He didn't know if the woman drank tea, but sometimes kindness doesn't need to ask first. He placed one mug on the table, along with a folded towel and a fresh pair of socks. Small gestures, familiar motions, quiet rituals of care. The kind of things you only do when you've spent too long alone and still hope someone will notice the details. He heard light footsteps approaching. The guest room door opened with a gentle creak. The woman stepped out slowly, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if expecting cold air or cold words. Behind her trailed the little girl, now wearing a slightly oversized sweatshirt Ethan had left outside the room. Her hair was dry, tied in a messy ponytail, and she clutched a stuffed animal with matted fur. A bear, maybe, or a rabbit that had lost its ears. Ethan didn't say anything. He just nodded toward the table. "Still warm," he said. The woman gave a small bow, like she'd been taught to do a long time ago and hadn't done in years. "Thank you," she whispered. The little girl stared at the tea, then at Ethan, then at her mother. She didn't speak, but she moved closer, cautiously, like a cat learning a new corner of the house. They sat down at the table, mother and child, close together. The woman sipped. The girl touched the towel, curious. Ethan turned to the stove, pretending to tidy up, giving them space. But his ears stayed open. "I'm Anna, and this is Hannah." Her voice was soft, but steadier now, as if naming herself was a way to anchor her place in the room. Ethan nodded. He didn't interrupt. "I used to work in accounting in Falls Church, small firm. Paper invoices, ledgers, the kind of stuff no one does anymore." Her fingers curled around the teacup like it was the last solid thing in her life. My husband wanted to start his own business, said we could be free. We took a loan. I co-signed. There was a long pause. He walked away 6 months later, said it was too much. She smiled. Not the kind of smile that says, "I'm okay." The kind that says, "I've stopped hoping anyone will understand." I stayed, tried to keep up the payments. When I couldn't, the bank started calling. Then strangers started showing up. 2 of them found us outside Hannah's daycare and started asking questions no child should hear. Ethan didn't speak. He just handed her a tissue. She didn't take it, so he left it on the table. I packed everything, took a bus. Didn't know where to go, just away. She stared out the window, eyes dry, voice calm, like someone who had cried everything out weeks ago in a motel bathroom with the light off. I saw your sign. Whispering Pines, Mineral Spring Lodge, simple stay, warm water. She laughed, just a breath. Didn't know if you were still open. Ethan finally turned around. I wasn't, but I am now. Their eyes met for the first time. It didn't feel like a meeting. It felt like recognition. Later that morning, Anna offered to help clean the kitchen. Ethan refused, but she insisted. Not out of politeness, out of dignity. I'm not asking to stay for free. She washed dishes without needing instructions, wiped down counters like she'd done it 100 times. Hannah dried forks with a towel twice her size, her little hands moving slowly, carefully, like she was performing something important. No one spoke much, but the air felt less hollow. Ethan caught himself staring at the towel on the chair, folded neatly after Hannah was done. It wasn't just a towel anymore. It was a message. We were here. We mattered. That afternoon, Ethan took out the reservation ledger. Blank pages. He opened the drawer beneath and looked at the envelope inside. The contract. It had been signed by a real estate agent 3 months ago, ready to sell the inn, just waiting on Ethan's final signature. He stared at it for a long time, then pushed it deeper into the drawer and shut it again. Not because of charity, but because of the way Hannah had smiled when she fed the soup to her stuffed animal and said, "It's hot, but nice." Some warmth you don't find on blueprints. Some rooms can't be priced by square footage. He stepped out onto the porch. The wind was different now. Still quiet, but it no longer whispered alone. It whispered again.
For the next 2 mornings, the Windflower Inn stirred to life in a way it hadn't for months. It didn't roar, it didn't bustle, but it breathed. The kettle sang at sunrise. Footsteps crossed the old pine floors. The front porch smelled faintly of lemon oil and fresh dew. And somewhere in the back kitchen, the clinking of bowls echoed like gentle applause. Ethan tried not to make it a habit. Tried. He told himself it was temporary, that Anna and her daughter just needed a place to land before moving on, that once her phone charged, once she found a bus schedule or a cousin 3 towns over, she'd leave. But then came the list. A list she wrote unprompted on a yellow legal pad she found near the sink. Kitchen checklist, just in case. Refill kettle, fold towels, right drawer, mop behind fridge, rinse sink at night, wipe spice jars, sticky lids. He stared at it, then at her handwriting, tidy, organized, unmistakably the product of someone who used to balance accounts and lives. And for a brief moment, Ethan felt something dangerous. Comfort. That afternoon, he found Hannah sitting cross-legged on the front porch, carefully placing small pine cones in a line. There were exactly 11, each one spaced 2 fingers apart. "What are you building?" A line? She said seriously. A line of what? She looked up. For people who need to wait their turn. Ethan smiled. The kind of smile that sneaks up on you when you're not used to using those muscles anymore. Well then, he said, sitting beside her, you're in charge. She nodded. I already am. Later, inside the main office, Ethan took out the clipboard. Old habit. When things needed doing, he wrote them here. Towel inventory, water heater checks, grocery needs, propane levels. His grandmother used the same one. It was faded now, edges worn smooth, ink ghosting from old lists beneath the new. He added a note. Check roof for leaks before next rain. Then, almost without thinking, he wrote, Ask Anna if she wants to stay for a few days in exchange for help. He stared at the words for a long time, then underlined them, once. That evening, as the sky faded into that perfect Blue Ridge violet, he knocked gently on the doorframe to the kitchen. Anna was drying spoons, not talking, not humming, just present. He cleared his throat, then held up the clipboard like a peace offering. I have an idea, he said. She turned, waited. You could stay. A few days. If it helps. There's always work around here. Anna blinked. He rushed to fill the silence. No pressure, nothing formal, just room and meals, and you help with some things. You already are, anyway. She placed the spoon down and nodded. Not out of desperation, but because it was a deal made with dignity. I'd like that. Ethan handed her the clipboard. She looked at it, ran her fingers across the wood, then handed it back. Do you want me to sign something? No. He meant to say more, but couldn't find the words. Just walked back toward the pantry, wondering why his chest felt lighter. That night, he found something on the counter. A jar of dried orange peels, neatly labeled. Ginger orange tea blend. Below it, a note in the same handwriting. I hope your guests like warm things. Some of us never forget them. There were no guests yet, but Ethan turned off the kitchen light with a strange, full feeling in his throat. Not hope, not yet, but maybe room for it.
The morning sun rose later in the mountains. By the time it brushed the window panes of the Windflower Inn, the kitchen had already been awake for an hour. The kettle was on its second boil. Toast browned in the old oven that never ticked quietly. And Anna stood barefoot on the warm tile floor, hair tied up, wearing one of Ethan's old aprons. She looked settled, not permanent, but less transient, like someone who had unpacked something invisible. Ethan watched from the hallway, leaning on the doorway, unsure whether to step in or let the moment breathe. She hadn't noticed him yet. Hannah was at the table, carefully buttering a slice of toast with both hands, tongue out in concentration like she was diffusing a bomb. The stuffed animal, still unidentifiable, sat on the chair beside her with its own tiny plate. Ethan smiled. He hadn't meant to. And that's when it happened. "Uncle E," Hannah said, without looking up, "do you want the first piece?" The world didn't stop, but Ethan did. His body froze halfway through an inhale, like the word had physically caught in his chest. Uncle E. No one had called him that before. He wasn't sure why it landed so heavily. Maybe because it wasn't forced. Maybe because it came from a child who didn't ask what he was willing to be. She just named him. Ethan stepped forward and took the offered plate. "Thanks," he managed. They were finishing the first bites when the sound came, tires crunching gravel outside the front gate. Not loud, not urgent, but unfamiliar. Ethan stood slowly, glancing at Anna. She shrugged, more curious than alarmed. He stepped outside. A tan sedan with out-of-state plates pulled up. The driver, a man in his 50s, rolled down the window and smiled. "Hey there, do you still take walk-ins?" Ethan blinked. It had been nearly 9 months since someone asked that question. The words took a moment to register. "Yes, we do." The man's name was Greg, recently retired. He was driving through the Blue Ridge looking for quiet. "I saw your sign at the old gas station down the hill. Didn't know if it was still open, but figured I'd check." Ethan hadn't realized the sign was still standing. Anna must have wiped it off during one of her morning sweeps. He checked the guest book. Room 3 was clean. He handed over a key and wrote, "Greg, 1 night, possibly 2, in tidy print. His handwriting had gotten rusty. Greg nodded, paid in cash, and wheeled in a small suitcase with a busted zipper. It was all wonderfully ordinary. And yet Ethan felt like he was watching someone put the first log back into a long, cold fireplace. Lunch was quiet. Greg didn't ask for much. He wandered the garden, sat by the spring, read a newspaper Ethan didn't know was still delivered. But at 4:15 p.m., he wandered back to the kitchen, drawn by the scent. "What is that?" he asked. Anna smiled without looking up. "They're ginger molasses cookies. They were my mother's recipe." It wasn't true. They were Bang Awai's. Anna had found the handwritten note pinned behind the cabinet, the ink barely legible, the words written in Vietnamese cursive. She couldn't read them all, but she had guessed. 1 egg, a splash of dark syrup, grated ginger, not powdered, and something about press flat, don't rush. Greg took 1 bite. His eyes lit up like someone had turned on a porch light inside his chest. "These taste like something I forgot I missed." Hannah offered him a napkin, folded carefully. Greg took it with a thank you nod. That evening, Ethan sat on the porch as the sky turned amber. Anna joined him holding 2 mugs of tea. She handed one over without speaking. He accepted. They sat like that for a while, listening to the spring trickle behind the house, to Greg's slow footsteps upstairs, to Hannah singing softly to her stuffed friend. "You okay?" Anna asked, finally. Ethan sipped, then nodded, but his voice came quieter than usual. "She used to make those cookies, you know." "Your grandmother?" He nodded. "Didn't think I'd ever smell that again." Anna looked down into her mug. "I didn't know the full recipe, just guessed." "You guessed right," Ethan said. Another silence, but it wasn't empty. It was warm, like air thickened by baking. Like the moment before the first raindrop falls. Not fear, but knowing. "Uncle E," Hannah called from inside, "we saved you the last cookie." Ethan didn't respond. He just smiled, stood up, and walked in. And in that moment, the Windflower Inn didn't just feel alive. It felt like it had started remembering itself. The scent of ginger cookies still lingered in the kitchen the next morning. Sunlight filtered through the half-drawn curtains, catching the dust in quiet golden spirals. Outside, a squirrel dashed across the porch railing, scattering a row of tiny pine cones Hannah had carefully arranged the day before. Ethan sat alone at the front desk, sipping lukewarm coffee, the guest book open but untouched. He wasn't waiting for anything, not really. And then his phone buzzed, a single email notification from Marissa Weller, Blue Ridge Property Group. The subject line was short. "Still considering selling?" Ethan blinked. It took a few seconds for his brain to catch up. That name belonged to a conversation he'd shut away with the rest of his doubts months ago, along with the unsigned contract and the ever-growing stack of unpaid maintenance notes. He tapped the screen. "Hi, Ethan. I know it's been a while since we last talked. Just a heads up, a buyer from Atlanta came back asking about the Windflower.
He's willing to increase the original offer by 15%. Serious about turning it into a boutique retreat. Would cover closing costs. Let me know if you're open to talking. Best, Marissa. He read the message twice. Then again. 15%. That was enough to patch the roof, fix the plumbing, and still have breathing room. That was enough to erase the guilt of holding on to something that might already be gone. He looked up. Anna was in the garden with Hannah, trimming a wild rosemary bush that had survived 3 winters. Hannah waved a small twig like a magic wand, giggling. Ethan set the phone down, but the email sat with him, like a shadow at the table. Later that afternoon, Greg checked out. He left behind a short handwritten note on the desk. "Thank you for the piece. I forgot how much I needed it. G." Ethan folded the note carefully and slid it into the guest book under the date. No one else came that day, which somehow made the email feel louder. That evening, as Anna cooked a simple noodle soup, Ethan found himself fumbling with the drawer under the desk. The contract was still there, unsigned, a little creased at the corners now. He pulled it out, held it. He could almost hear Marissa's voice from that first call. "It's a beautiful property, Ethan, but if you're not turning profit, you're sitting on weight." Weight. Yes, that word had clung to him for so long it had shaped his posture. But lately, it had changed. The silence wasn't as sharp. The house didn't echo the same way. And when Hannah's small fingers wrapped around his sleeve at breakfast to ask if she could serve tea to the next guest, he didn't feel weighed down. He felt necessary, useful, maybe even needed. He placed the contract back, didn't shut the drawer yet. Instead, he walked to the kitchen. Anna was humming something faint under her breath, a tune she didn't recognize, but her body did. It sounded like rice cooking in a pot, like steam from a towel-wrapped kettle, like home. She looked up when he entered. "You okay?" she asked. He hesitated. "I got an email." "Bad news?" "Not exactly." He paused, then said it plainly. "Someone wants to buy the inn again. They raised the offer." Anna stopped stirring. For a moment, the only sound was the gentle bubble of broth. "Oh?" she said quietly. Ethan expected a question, or at least a shift in her expression, but she only turned back to the pot, stirring once, twice, then lifting the ladle, as if the soup needed more attention than the future of the roof over their heads. "You should do what you need to do," she said finally. Calm, measured. He watched her hands. Steady. But her shoulders told a different story. "I haven't decided anything," Ethan said. Anna nodded, didn't look up. Then she added, so soft it nearly didn't reach him, "Just don't let someone else define what this place is worth." Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, walked back toward the hallway, and finally shut the drawer.
The wind picked up that evening. Not strong, just persistent. The kind of wind that tapped window panes and whispered through the old eaves of the Windflower like a child trying to get your attention without waking anyone else. Inside, the inn was warm, but not everyone felt it. It started with a cough, soft at first, then deeper, shorter, then again. By the fourth one, Anna was already kneeling beside the small cot in the guest room, hand on Hannah's forehead. Too warm, much too warm. She turned to Ethan, who was in the hallway adjusting a fuse box that hadn't buzzed in years. "I think she has a fever." Ethan didn't hesitate. Within minutes, the space heater was moved closer, a kettle was on the stove, and a bowl of lukewarm water sat beside Hannah's bed. The girl lay curled up, one hand still wrapped around the earless stuffed animal she hadn't let go since arrival. Anna dabbed her cheeks with a damp cloth. "She's usually stronger than this," she murmured. It wasn't an apology. It was heartbreak in a whisper. Ethan knelt beside her, offered a folded towel. "I can drive into town, pick up medicine if you need," he said. Anna shook her head. "I brought some, just didn't think I'd need it." Then added, quieter, "Didn't think we'd stay this long." Ethan didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. He pulled a wooden chair closer to the bed, an old one with a soft rock to it, his grandmother's. Anna looked surprised. "You don't have to." "I know." He sat down, still staying. The hours blurred. Anna dozed in a corner chair, head tilted against the wall. Ethan sat in the rocker, motionless, except for the quiet sway of the chair beneath him and the steady rise and fall of Hannah's breathing. At one point, her small hand reached out from under the blanket. He didn't think, he simply took it. Tiny fingers curled into his palm like they belonged there. The wind outside howled once, sharp and sudden, rattling the back window. Hannah stirred. He squeezed gently. She didn't wake, but her breathing evened out, and for a moment, just a moment, it was as if the entire house held its breath with her. Midnight came and went. The clock in the hallway ticked softly, a rhythm that somehow felt like a lullaby. Ethan glanced at Anna. She hadn't moved. He looked back at Hannah. Sweat had formed near her hairline, but her skin no longer burned against his fingers. He reached for the towel, gently wiped her forehead, and smiled. "She's cooling down," he whispered, even though no one was awake to hear it. But maybe the house did. Maybe the walls that had heard laughter, then silence, then cautious footsteps, maybe they heard this too. The sound of a man remembering how to care. Before dawn, Anna stirred. Her eyes found Ethan still in the chair, still holding Hannah's hand, still rocking gently, like his own breath might wake her. Anna didn't speak. She just walked over and laid a folded blanket over his shoulders and stood there for a moment. He didn't look up, but he whispered, "She'll be okay." Anna nodded, then whispered back, "I think we all will."
The sun broke through early that morning, sharp, golden, almost loud in how clear it was. The Windflower Inn breathed deeper. A morning breeze curled through the cracked kitchen window, carrying the scent of mint and old pine. The soup pot had cooled, the towels from the night before were folded on the bench. The fever had passed. Hannah sat on the porch steps, pale but smiling, a thin blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a superhero cape. Anna was a few feet away, clipping the rosemary bush back into shape. She kept glancing over at her daughter every few seconds. Old habits of mothers never really die. Ethan stepped out with 2 mugs of tea, one for Anna, one for himself. He hesitated, then handed the chipped one to her. Anna raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. "It's the one with character." She smiled, quietly, gratefully, and maybe a little sadly. The mail arrived around 10:15, a routine delivery, though no one at the Windflower really expected anything. The mailbox had long since stopped being a place of anticipation, mostly ads, maybe an occasional utility notice. But today, tucked between a gardening catalog and a coupon for bulk soap, was a small square envelope. No return address, just Ethan's name, handwritten. He opened it slowly, fingers suddenly more aware of their motion than usual. Inside was a postcard, a watercolor painting of a field at dusk, the kind of art you find in roadside bookstores, always signed R.M. or Elaine with no last name. On the back, 5 words, "For the tea, not the room." Paperclipped to the corner was a crisp $100 bill, folded once. Ethan stared at it for a long time, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. He flipped the card over again. Nothing else. No name. But he knew. Greg, the man who checked in, sat by the spring, said almost nothing, and left a note that simply read, "Thank you for the peace." Ethan folded the bill, put the postcard on the desk, didn't smile. But something in his chest shifted, like a drawer long stuck had loosened a bit. Anna stepped in, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mail?" Ethan handed her the card. She read it, then looked up with a soft laugh. "You made $100 on a cup of tea," she said. Ethan shook his head. "No, I made it on warmth." Anna looked at him more carefully now, like she was seeing the weight behind the joke. Then she set the card gently against the back wall of the front desk, next to the guest book, beside a sprig of dried lavender Hannah had left there 2 days ago. "Leave it there," she said. "It belongs here." That afternoon, Hannah drew a picture. Crayons on printer paper. 3 stick figures, one tall, one with a ponytail, one very small, all holding hands under a triangle that said, in messy purple letters, Wind LL Inn. Below it, in bright red, My Home. She handed it to Ethan without a word. He took it with both hands, held it like a contract, not one signed in ink, but in trust.
The knock on the door came just after lunch. 3 quick raps, then one soft tap, like someone polite but excited. Anna wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the front door. Ethan was upstairs fixing a dripping faucet, and Hannah was drawing suns with faces in the living room. Outside stood a young woman in hiking boots and a denim jacket patched with embroidered logos, mountains, stars, coffee cups. Behind her were 3 other students, 2 with cameras slung across their shoulders, one holding a folder and what looked like a field recorder. "Hi," the girl said, breathless but beaming. "Sorry to barge in. We're from Appalachian State University, Tourism Studies program. We're working on a documentary about local stays and community-centered hospitality." Anna blinked. "Okay." "We were at a gas station 10 minutes back and the clerk mentioned Windflower. Said it wasn't fancy, but had the best feel." She looked down at her paper. "We're focusing on emotional guest experiences, rural authenticity, and architectural storytelling." She grinned. "Basically, we love places that don't pretend to be anything but themselves." Anna laughed. "Well, that's us, for sure." Ethan appeared halfway down the stairs, wrench in hand. The denim jacket girl pointed. "You must be the owner." Ethan froze. "Co-owner?" he corrected, eyes flicking toward the living room. Anna smiled, half amusement, half warning. "I'm Lacey," the girl said, extending a hand. "Would you be willing to let us film a short segment here? Nothing scripted, just you, the house, maybe a few questions about why you do what you do." Ethan hesitated. Cameras? Talking? He was better with sinks. But Hannah popped her head out from behind the couch, her crayon-streaked fingers waving. "Do you want to see my tea tray?" Anna said. Lacey kneeled to her level instantly. "Absolutely." 5 minutes later, Hannah was giving a full tour of the front porch, explaining why the mismatched chairs were on purpose and how the lavender sprigs were picked only on Tuesdays because that's when the sun is best. The students followed her fascinated, filming the inn not like a business, but like a friend telling stories in sunlight. Ethan leaned on the doorway watching. For the first time in weeks, his hands weren't gripping anything. Inside, Lacey set up a small interview corner near the bookcase. She said, "Just pretend we're not here." Easy for her to say. But Ethan sat anyway. They asked questions softly, gently. What does Windflower mean to you? What do you hope guests leave with? Why haven't you sold? He didn't give long answers, but his silences were clear. Like the way his eyes paused on a photo of his grandmother behind the desk, or the way his fingers traced the edge of the old ledger book before answering, "Because something doesn't have to be perfect to be worth keeping." That line stayed with them, even after the camera stopped rolling. Before they left, the students gifted a small hand-bound book, blank pages, lined edges, wrapped in recycled cloth. "For your next guest book, the one you haven't written yet." Anna thanked them. Hannah gave everyone lavender. Ethan walked them to the car. Just before they drove off, Lacey rolled down the window. "You know, most of the places we visit feel like places, but this feels like a pause." Then she was gone.
The sky had been dark since mid-afternoon. By nightfall, it had collapsed completely into rain, thick, steady, the kind that blurred the windows and softened the edges of the world outside. Inside the Windflower Inn, the lights glowed amber. A kettle hummed quietly on the stove. Hannah was asleep upstairs, a small stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Anna sat in the corner of the living room, stitching the edge of a fraying curtain, her fingers working in rhythm with the patter of rain on the tin roof. Ethan stood by the window, not watching, just listening. Then, the phone buzzed. Not a message, a call. Marissa. He stared at the screen. Anna looked up, caught the name. Their eyes met. She didn't speak, just nodded once, slow and steady. Ethan answered. "Ethan!" Marissa's voice came through bright and clear, almost too cheery for the quiet evening. "Hey there! I know it's late, but I just wanted to follow up. The buyer from Atlanta? He's upping the offer again. 25% now, and he's including a restoration fund." She paused. "That's pretty rare, you know. Nobody does that for places like yours. You could walk away debt-free, maybe even ahead." Ethan said nothing. The kettle clicked off behind him. Marissa's voice softened. "I know this place means something to you, but sometimes, Ethan, sentiment gets in the way of starting fresh." Another pause. And she added gently, "What do you think?" Outside, the rain danced louder on the roof. A wind shifted the porch swing. Ethan looked down at the floorboards, worn, scuffed, uneven in places. He loved every flaw. He loved that they creaked different under Hannah's footsteps than under his. He glanced toward the kitchen where a drawing still hung on the fridge. Windflower Inn. 3 stick figures smiling under a crooked roof. Then he spoke. Calm. Low. Unshakable. "I think we already started fresh." Marissa was silent for a beat. Then she exhaled, the kind of sigh that held no resentment, just surprise. "Well, I guess that's a no." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, that's a no." "All right, Ethan. I wish you the best." "You too." He hung up, set the phone down. And for the first time since the offer came, he didn't feel pulled in half. He felt whole. Behind him, Anna hadn't moved, but her stitching had stopped. She looked at him from across the room. "Are you sure?" she asked. Ethan walked over.
sat on the armrest beside her. About the future? No. But about this place? I look around, at the books, the light, the quiet warmth that couldn't be priced. Yes, I'm sure. Anna nodded, and for the first time, let the thread fall from her fingers. They sat in silence, listening to the rain. Not the storm kind, but the kind that makes you believe the earth is being healed, slowly, drop by drop.
The sign was crooked again. It always tilted a little to the left after rain. A stubborn piece of wood with rusted hinges and too much memory in the grain. Ethan straightened it anyway, then stepped back and looked at it. Windflower Inn. Still hand-painted, still fading, still honest. Inside, Hannah was hard at work. She dragged the small folding table from the laundry room and set it up by the front window. On top, a floral cloth napkin, 3 mismatched teacups, a plate of store-bought cookies, and a tin of raspberry leaf tea Ethan had forgotten they even had. "She calls it the welcome table now," Anna whispered, as she passed by with a tray of cut lemons. "And we are not allowed to touch anything until the guests arrive." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Plural?" Anna just smiled. By 3 p.m., they arrived. None of them planned, all of them needed. First, a woman in her late 70s with silver hair and thick boots wandered in, map in hand. "I was looking for the hiking trail, but I think I ended up in a storybook." Next, a young couple, James and Elise, who'd booked one night after losing their jobs in the city. "We just needed somewhere soft," James said, "even for 24 hours. And then, without warning, a man with a quiet beard and a harmonica in his coat pocket stepped in and nodded at Ethan. No words, just music when asked. Hannah stood on a step stool by the table. She said, "Welcome to my tea ceremony." She was serious as royalty. "Everyone gets 1 cookie and as much quiet as you want." They chuckled, but followed her instructions. Even the man with the harmonica. He played a soft, slow tune halfway through. No one spoke. The notes filled the room like warm sunlight. Outside, the wind moved gently through the porch chimes. Inside, time slowed. Ethan watched from the hallway. He didn't interrupt, didn't manage anything, just observed, and for the first time truly saw what the Windflower had become. Not a business, not a home, a harbor. A place where people could come in carrying silence and leave with a little less of it. Anna joined him with 2 mugs of tea. "You're not worried about running out of cookies?" he joked. Anna shrugged. "That's what corner stores are for." They sipped in silence. In the living room, Hannah poured lukewarm tea into chipped porcelain like it was gold. The harmonica player played a second tune. The old woman clapped softly. The young couple held hands, and something invisible settled over them all. Not weight, not sorrow, permission. To be seen, to be still. It came on a Wednesday, in the late mail, tucked between a heating bill and a catalog no one asked for. The envelope was plain, off-white, handwritten. No return address. But the handwriting made Ethan stop halfway through the front porch. He hadn't seen it in years. Didn't need to. He knew. Ben. He sat on the steps. The sun was warm, but the envelope felt cold in his hands. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he stared at the horizon, the way the road curved just beyond the gate, as if always inviting and always out of reach. Then, quietly, he opened the letter. "Ethan, I don't know if this'll reach you. I got the address from the registry.
I heard about Windflower from someone passing through Asheville who said they stayed in a place that felt like old kindness. I thought of you. I don't expect anything, but I was wondering, would it be okay if I came by for a couple nights? I've been tired lately, and I remember the rocking chair. Ben. That last line, simple as it was, folded Ethan in half. The rocking chair. The one on the porch now had belonged to their grandmother, but there was another, older one, once in their childhood living room. It creaked and groaned and held secrets whispered in the dark, back when they were boys, before inheritance lawyers, before anger, before silence. Ethan folded the letter slowly. Anna walked out with 2 glasses of lemonade, saw his face, paused. Everything okay? He handed her the letter. She read it once, then again. She didn't ask, just sat beside him on the steps. After a long minute, she said, "You don't have to say yes." Ethan shook his head. "I don't know if I can say anything at all." Anna looked at the fields. The wind carried the scent of pine and something blooming, maybe rosemary, maybe thyme. "You don't have to forgive him," she said. "Just don't close the door so tightly it can't open again." That night, Ethan took out an old phone, one he hadn't touched in years. Still had Ben's number. He typed a message, then deleted it. Typed again, then stared. He didn't send it, but he didn't delete the contact either. Instead, he walked out to the porch, sat in the rocker, and let it creak beneath him. The stars were quiet, and for the first time in a long time, he let memory sit beside him without asking it to leave.
Ben arrived late afternoon, the kind of late where the light slants in sideways, making dust dance in the air and time feels soft around the edges. He came by foot, no car, just a worn-out backpack and a slight limp in his step that hadn't been there 10 years ago. Ethan opened the door before Ben could knock. For a moment, neither spoke. They just stood there, 2 men who used to share a bunk bed and now barely shared memories. Ben gave a small nod. "Hey," he said. Ethan nodded back. "Come in." That was all. No hug, no hard handshake, just a door opening and the silence between them being allowed to walk into. Anna had set the table. 4 plates, 4 glasses. 1 chair, the farthest one, had a folded paper under one leg. Ben noticed, paused. Ethan caught his glance. "It wobbles," he said. "The paper helps." Ben half smiled. "Still using book pages?" Ethan looked away. "It was already torn." They sat. Hannah launched into a story about a chipmunk she saw stealing one of her granola bars. She didn't seem to notice the tension, or maybe she did and just chose to ignore it like a child chooses sunlight over clouds. She poured water for everyone, even Ben. "Welcome to my tea and dinner club," she declared, serious. "Membership requires listening." Ben chuckled. Ethan looked at him. It had been a long time since he'd heard that laugh, even longer since it wasn't directed at someone else. Dinner was slow, mostly quiet, but not strained. Like an old radio finally tuning back in, crackly but promising music. Ben asked about the house, about Hannah, about the town. He didn't ask about the past. Ethan didn't offer it. But when Ben reached for the salt and the leg of the chair gave a faint creak, he caught the folded paper with his hand, pushed it back into place, and muttered, "Still holding, huh?" Ethan looked up, met his eyes, and for the first time that day, smiled. "Yeah." still holding. That night, Ethan placed fresh sheets in the guest room. Ben stood at the doorway. "I'll only stay a couple nights," he said. "You'll stay as long as you need," Ethan replied. He didn't say welcome back. He didn't need to. The chair had already said it for him.
It was raining again. Not the kind of storm that howls, but a soft, steady tap, like a memory knocking gently on the roof. Anna had gone to bed early. Hannah was already asleep, curled into her blanket fortress upstairs. Only the kitchen remained awake. Ethan poured 2 cups of tea. 1 plain mug, 1 old porcelain cup with a faint crack near the handle, almost invisible now, but still there if you looked close. He handed the porcelain cup to Ben. Ben blinked. "This was the one I broke." Ethan shrugged. "It's been glued. Holds just fine." Ben turned the cup in his hands. Didn't drink. Just held it. "I didn't leave because of the house, you know," he said finally. Ethan said nothing. Ben continued. "I left because I thought everything here had already decided what I was supposed to be. You, Dad, the town, even the porch. I couldn't breathe inside a story I didn't write." He looked down. "But I was wrong. I didn't go find a new story. I just stopped writing at all." Ethan took a sip of tea, watched the rain slide down the window.
The morning came wrapped in mist. Outside, the fields were silver with dew, the air cool and smelling faintly of rosemary and old rain. Ethan woke to the sound of quiet. Not the silence of absence, the quiet of something complete. He walked into the kitchen. Anna was still upstairs. Hannah was singing softly to herself in the other room, arranging her mismatched sock drawer like it was an art exhibit. The kettle was warm, already clicked off. A clean mug sat next to it. And on the cabinet, just above the sink, a small, square piece of paper. Ethan stepped closer, recognized the handwriting. Ben. Thank you for letting the broken things stay. That was it. No signature, no forwarding address, no return promise. Just a sentence that landed in Ethan's chest like a stone dropped gently into still water. An hour later, Hannah came skipping into the kitchen. She spotted the note. "Who wrote that?" she asked. Ethan took a breath.
Porter or glass of orange juice? Instead of answering, he knelt down and tied the loose end of a shoelace. Someone who needed tea and quiet, he said. Hannah nodded like that was the most reasonable explanation in the world. She reached up and tapped the note with one finger. Can we keep it? Ethan looked at the little square of paper, slightly curling at the edges, held by one piece of old tape. He nodded. Yeah, we'll keep it. And they did. He didn't laminate it, didn't frame it, just let it be. Paper, tape, memory. A small reminder that sometimes the realest things in a place are the ones you don't try to perfect. Later that day, when Ethan stepped out onto the porch, the air had cleared. The Windflower sign swung gently, and for the first time in years, he didn't wonder if he should repaint it. He liked it just like that, a little tilted, still holding.
6 months later, the cabinet note was still there, curled a bit more at the corners, tape replaced once, but never removed. It had become part of the kitchen, like the chipped kettle, the loose floorboard near the fridge, or Hannah's weekly sock exhibitions on the stairs. Life continued. Guests came and went, quietly mostly. A woman who brought her father's ashes and left behind a single gardenia. A teenager who ran away for 2 nights and folded her pillowcase before leaving. A musician who played guitar at 3 a.m. and scribbled chords on the napkin drawer. Hannah had a new obsession, the journal. Everyone who stays has to write 1 sentence, she declared. She called it Things People Leave Behind. Anna bought a leather-bound book from a second-hand store. The spine cracked just right. The pages were thick and off-white, like they had something old to say. It lived on the shelf near the stairs. People wrote in it without being asked. One person wrote, "This place reminded me that I still exist." Another person wrote, "The wind here sounds like my mother humming." Someone else wrote, "I forgave someone here, maybe myself." Pages filled slowly, one by one sentence at a time. Ethan never wrote in it. Not until a night when the stars were out and the house had gone still, and the kettle gave a tired little sigh as it cooled. He sat at the kitchen table, opened to the last page, picked up a pen, stared at the blank space, then wrote, in his slow, slightly slanted handwriting, "I think my mother would have liked the tea." He closed the journal, didn't read back, didn't date it, just left it there, then turned off the light and went to bed. Outside, the wind shifted gently through the porch chimes. Inside, the house kept breathing.